So Ashu, who is your biggest inspiration in your life and your career?
Interesting question. Biggest inspiration. Difficult to say any one person, but let me give you maybe this from 2 or 3 different contexts. So let's say, look, I'm from India, so cricket, right? So let me pick up a cricket idol, Sachin Tendulkar. I mean, and why? Because I guess just the pursuit of excellence. I've seen him prior to a World Cup match just getting into the zone, and he was out there at the nets blindfolded and practicing and just listening to the sound of the ball coming onto the bat. And this is after having spent like 20 years playing cricket at the world stage. And that's excellence. So, I mean, he's a big idol for me. And another one I'd look at, someone who follows their dreams. There's this Chinese author, a woman called Sun Shuyun, who basically she grew up in the old days in communist China. Then things changed there, and she actually got a chance to follow her dreams. And she's written this book called 10,000 Miles Without a Cloud. It's basically she's retraced the steps of this Chinese monk who traveled all the way across through the Silk Route from China all the way to southern India and wrote a beautiful travelogue. And she did exactly the same thing in pretty desperate circumstances, but she did it and she just followed her dreams.
Wow.
I thought that was very inspiring. How about you, Charlotte?
I think I had to think about it while you're talking then. And it's probably really close to home for me. Quite sweet, but I'd say my father. And for me, it's because he's so entrepreneurial and very strong. And it's something that has sat very prominently for me whilst I've embarked on my career. And he's always obviously been very supportive of everything I've wanted to do. But given me that strength, being a woman, being in an industry where entrepreneurship, I think, really does get you far.
Yes.
I've learned an awful lot from him. From that, he's always had his own business for a very long time.
That's wonderful.
It is very lucky.
Charlotte, how long have you been with Mindshare?
I've been with Mindshare for 6.5 years.
And what attracted you? What brought you here?
Well, I came in. Actually, I worked previously in a UK-focused role, but always in digital. And that's always been my passion. My job's evolved quite a lot since then. Okay. But when I came across, it was quite a change to go from working just in one market to then taking on a worldwide responsibility. So it was kind of interesting. And I think the reason I chose Mindshare at that juncture, when I just finished a graduation scheme and stayed at my previous employer for a couple of years, I felt I really wanted a new challenge. And I tell you what was quite interesting, when I first started discussing opportunities in the industry, I spoke to a couple of colleagues at the time about Mindshare, and you know that Mindshare is the big beast. It's the Goliath of the industry in many ways. Right. And because previously I've been working at still a very well-known media agency, PhD, but it was very different in its nature. And I thought, well, actually, do you know what? If I'm going to work somewhere, if I'm going to take my next step, then I want to work at the biggest, and I want to be at the Goliath, and I want those opportunities to really to work somewhere where it has that scale and that clout. So that really intrigued me.
Well, I've been with Mindshare for about 10 years, but again, if I look at all the leaders around the world for our network, probably I was late to the party because I think we started sometime in '97 and I joined about 5 years later. I think the good thing was that when I heard about Mindshare, and that's the time when I joined in 2002, it had already set up, there was a big global network, and I could actually have a view of what was going on, and clearly what attracted me really was the people. So, first conversation with Dominic back in 2001 when we were just about to set up the company in India, and he said, you know, this is where we've come from, and that's how we've been so successful. And I just thought about it. Having worked prior to that in the big global creative agency world, to suddenly see Mindshare coming from nowhere, a very sort of, committed bunch of people who wouldn't take no for an answer, who could take on I was part of that establishment, and I could see how things changed and how they created a business out of nothing. And it was, I think, just the people. Just the spirit of saying that I can get things done, and taking on what is the establishment at that point in time, and actually proving it to everybody that this bunch of people could do it.
Yeah.
That I found it really, really exciting, and I think that's really what attracted me to come and join at that time. What are the things which sort of get you upset about what's going on in the industry? I know it's a great place to work, and you've just said all the exciting things that you do at work, but I'm sure there must be some other things which you don't like.
Sure. I think there's a real trait in the industry to always look to be moving on, and we're certainly guilty of chasing the newest, brightest, shiniest object. And I think that can have some, that offers amazing opportunities, and we can always be revitalising ourselves, our own careers, and creating new challenges, which I think we both would love. But I think when it comes to talent, teams, building up the knowledge of a client,
right,
this constant rejuvenation and often loss of talent that we go through can be really problematic. And I know, running luxury bits of business where the pace of change historically, and probably still true now, is that much slower. And we have clients, from various brands across a portfolio of luxury clients that we work with who, people will work there for their entire career, and certainly, a decade is nothing. So what they really look for, and they really, I guess, look to us for as well, is this depth of knowledge of a client, of their business, so that, Rolex will say to me, "Oh, Charlotte, you bleed green," which is a great compliment to me, and that's because I've worked in the business and I understand the nuances of it. And I think because of the nature of media and the fact that we have this kind of turnaround means that I can't always offer that to them all the time in terms of a consistency of team.
Is there, as an industry, do we have a sort of a short-term approach to talent? What do you think is going wrong?
I think it's something that's very inherent in the industry. I think it's kind of, it's expected, certainly at a more junior, mid-management level, that you go and you experience different agencies. So I think there's something that is true of the industry as a whole. I also think within the way that we're structured, and you can argue there's pros and cons in both ways, but when you're structured around a particular client, if that particular client isn't doing, for example, social, and the talent you have, they're in the middle of their career, they want to really bolster all of their experience. If you can't offer that on that one piece of business, then what tends to happen, and wrongly, is we don't identify that as a problem from the beginning, or when it's an issue, and give that person another opportunity within the business, rather they go out and they look elsewhere. So I think maybe it's about acknowledging the need for diversity at the beginning, and having maybe a portfolio approach, which is actually what we're doing with the luxury group. Which is interesting.
What I take out from that also is that therefore there is no career planning. So because there are a lot of things happening in the industry, there's a lot of change, and I guess people therefore always want to keep themselves at the forefront and keep learning new things if they want to advance their careers, right? And so we have this dilemma. On the one side of the coin is the fact that our business as a whole doesn't invest in talent the way some of our clients do, for instance.
No.
So we do have a very short-term and opportunistic approach to talent. We win a client, we'll go and hire a few people, we lose that client and we lose the people.
That's true.
So where is the career? And therefore, consequent to that, I guess, is the career planning. So if you've got people who are very good with a set of clients, we want to leave them there because we don't have to deal with any problems, right? So it's all, everyone's happy, it's all stable. But yeah, I mean, like you're pointing out, if those clients are not experimentative, or bigger problem is that if they're not at the cutting edge of all the changes which are happening in our industry, then those people tend to get left behind, because we are not doing actively, we are not managing their careers or planning for the future. So I think that's a big issue for the industry.
What would you say is the thing that most kind of gets your goat, as we'd say in England? Talent.
I would say it's the short-term approach.
Yeah.
That's what's leading to the commoditization of the industry, because everything is opportunistic, like I just said, and I think we are all guilty of it. So I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I think those are the business pressures or challenges. But the fact is that, I mean, we probably as an industry the least invested in managing of the talent. So we've got great, I mean, if you look at the people who are really successful in our industry, are great product people, great thinkers who lead from the front in terms of creating great work for clients, but not great leaders in terms of building up a huge pool of talent around them and making sure that all of those people go out and succeed. I mean, that's less visible. So that is a real issue, and that really gets my goat, as they say.
So you've been at Mindshare for 10 years though, so what has kept you at Mindshare?
I think just the fact that we are in this industry and we are at the forefront of all the changes. And if you go back to it, it's really the sort of that restless energy and that spirit. So it's a great network. We're very successful. We've got a lot of global clients, lots of people, many things happening. But I think what keeps me going here is the fact that we don't sort of continue to stay in the moment and say, oh, this is great work, now let's just sit back and enjoy. There is that sense of restlessness, that energy constantly to say, oh, this is something which was done very well yesterday, but now let's move on to the, like you were saying earlier in the conversation, was the next shiny toy.
Exactly.
I think that sort of continuous sort of restlessness and I would say not wanting to stay in the status quo is probably the biggest attraction for me.
And that's what attracts you to the industry.
Absolutely.
Because I was thinking, do we put that upon ourselves, this restlessness, or do you think that's actually what the clients expect from us? Because when you think we are a service and we are, we'll shape and adapt according to what the client specifically will be looking for.
Yes.
So do you think it's an internal and external pressure?
I guess it's both. I mean, some of it is external because there are, I wouldn't say all clients, but many clients are like that. But if you look at the industry as a whole, all the agencies are not as successful.
No.
Some have had their time, have come and gone.
Yeah.
Others have taken their place. And I think that really is then characterized by the culture of that agency and the people and the talent which is in there, right? That really makes the difference. And I find that therefore, in Mindshare, you see abundance of that. And there have been others where you haven't seen it and they've fallen by the wayside, but there are new ones who have emerged as well, who have that same sense. So yes, some of it is external and is the requirement from clients. But I think it's also how we organize ourselves and the kind of people who we've got within a team. And if there are people like that, then of course you see. So I would say it's both.
Is our industry now the preserve of mad men or the maths men?
Yeah, I noticed you said men and not women.
Well,
I thought our industry is a preserve of women.
Or mad women, that doesn't sound so good, does it really?
All right. What do you think? I mean, if you look around at all the people who are leaders in our business today, what do you think they are, madmen or mathmen?
I think there is...
Let's start from the top.
Let's start from... Should we categorise it? This could take a while. Well, I think it's a really interesting question because I feel like a politician. I'm going to say it's a mixture of both, and I hate it. But someone who I very much admire, and as a person, but also as a business, is Angela Ardent and everything that working with Christopher Bailey they have achieved Burberry, and
Yes.
something she talks about is this left brain, right brain, and the need to actually work alongside someone who is not polar opposite, but who probably overcompensates for where you over whatever. And I think it's really interesting that when you hear her speak, she is an accountant, she's a financial lady, and she works so well with Christopher Bailey because he is so creative. But what you need is to complement each other, and you can't have, Christopher Bailey can't be creative just for the sake of being creative. He needs to have an eye on the business, and similarly Angela has been creative in how she's run her business. So I think this mirroring and swapping of those qualities is actually key in this, and maybe it's more of a generational time, it's a generational problem, it's a trait that we see across all industries.
Yes, of course.
Is this need to be accountable and creative, because we have information at our fingertips, but what are you going to do with it?
With it, yes.
Is the question.
I agree.
Are you a madman or are you a math man?
What do you think?
Well,
It's actually an interesting question. I mean, so there are two questions in there, in fact, the way we framed it. So one was the madmen or the mathmen, and the other was men or women, right? There were two in there. So let's look at the first one first. I guess traditionally, given the heritage of the business, it was probably dominated by more the mathmen. Think urban. So an entire generation of leaders, I think, within the business who were more the mathmen than the madmen. And the madmen were probably a sprinkling of them amongst a whole army of, if you would say, mathmen.
yes.
Right. But I think the profile's clearly changed in the last few years, and it will continue to change. So, and you have two different dynamics here. So we all know that with the impact of technology and all the data that's coming through, you definitely need even more advanced mathmen, frankly, or people who are very savvy with technology. So you need actually more and more of that because of the complexity, I think, on that side of the business. At the same time, it's equally, like you said, the creativity and the ideas business, and it's about really trying to figure out how to make use of all the information and the technology platforms that are there. So you probably need a new breed of the madmen as well, right? Who are fairly conversant with the technology, but are not necessarily the mathmen, but who can think and create great stories and great ideas on all the new technology platforms. So coming to the second question, which was men or women, right? So I don't know what the gender ratio is in our industry here, or let's say in North America, but if I look around in some of the emerging markets, certainly most of Asia, especially in North and East Asia, and also Russia, you find that the gender ratio is heavily skewed in our business towards women. And also what you find across most of Asia is that therefore there are more mad women than mathmen in the business. And I think it shows therefore in the way they work and in the way the work comes out. Because genuinely I think that women tend to be we all know that women are more intuitive and they're probably more creative in a field like this, which is why they dominate our industry in most of those countries.
And multitasking, it must be said.
I'm sure they are. I think the other big dynamic in our industry is, and again this has a implication I think for the kind of people that we attract. So you've got societies like here, most of the Western world, extremely mature in terms of the availability of technology, the use of digital media platforms, and the prevalence of social media, and therefore the way we market our brands to people is, just the availability of data and all these platforms allows us to come up with a fairly sophisticated approach. And then you contrast it with a lot of the emerging countries, so China, Vietnam, Indonesia, China, for example. So you deal with totally different extremes. So it's the world's second biggest economy, right? But we must not forget that at the same time, its per capita income is still about $5,400 a year, which really keeps it amongst the low-income countries of the world from an individual consumer point of view. There's large parts of the country still live in small towns and in sort of rural areas, and aspire to a different lifestyle. And for them, connectedness and being, part of a social media network is probably going to come at a subsequent generation. And we still, when we market our brands to them, the challenges are very, very different.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the same country, in the same society, you have extremely rich people, because the wealth has percolated to a certain set of people there, and the consumers tend to behave very much like they would here, and they have enormous purchasing power. And so when you're marketing brands in a country like that, you have to have talent which can, you were talking about multitasking, actually be able to deal with complexity like that. So on the one hand, you're out there in villages activating your brand and painting water buffaloes, and at the other extreme, you are running campaigns and tracking what people are saying through social media, right? So and you've got to have people who can deal with such broad sort of span of complexities.
And hiring people who have expertise or interest indeed in both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah. So how do you find it in your sector? Because I'm sure you plan for brands like Rolex in markets like China. So how do you go about doing that? And how do you deal with the talent issue there?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, luxury brands, as we all know, they're really looking at that top 1%, 2%, 3% of high net worth individuals around the world, and they are increasingly in these markets which are not as advanced in terms of their media. And it's been a really interesting journey, actually. It's one you mentioned with Rolex we've been a part of, and really understanding the importance of a consistent brand across those different markets, and is a challenge. And I think that's where having global talent, having a talent that is connected, is so important for them, because they will look for consistency. You can't walk out of an airport in Paris and in Heathrow and then in Lagos or in Beijing and find a different brand. It needs to look and feel the same. So I think making sure that we have a team and a resource structure in place that enables us to deliver that for them is really important. And then the next thing is about, in terms of talent, finding the right balance of needing to have a true understanding on the ground of that society, the nuances of it, the different dynamics, the different cultural rights and wrongs. Perhaps some of the language that some luxury brands have used in the past doesn't really work in China because they don't have, legacy. And we all know a luxury brand, its DNA and why it is a luxury brand is because of its history and the stories it can tell of the past.
Absolutely.
And in markets such as China, you don't have those points of reference to bring up, to percolate for these individuals, because they weren't aware of them at the time. So how is a luxury brand still core to its DNA without being too, how should we say, wishful and kind of retrospective looking? It's kind of finding this new, reinvigorated brand looking to the future and just referencing the past. So it's a really interesting. So I think finding the right talent to work on that business there, who is native, who grew up in China or India or you mentioned Indonesia, which is where we're looking to next. Finding the locals there who also understand how to work with clients who are based in Switzerland or based in Paris, who work in a particular way, who are very detailed, who are very precise, and it's not about speed, it's about making the right decisions is a real quandary. It's almost pulling in two different directions.
Yeah, and at times like these, don't you feel glad that you work with a global network? I'm sure our clients do at such times, right? Because you go to any of these countries, our industry has not been around long enough for us to have that breadth of talent within any individual market. And I guess that's where a global network really comes into play, because you complement different skills from different parts of the world and you just pull it together.
Absolutely.
And you can actually then get things done in all these countries where you may not have the appropriate talent to do the full thing. So I think that's where really the power of a global network shows into it. But sometimes the global network doesn't work well also, right?
Yeah, God.
So
Yes.
What happens there?
I know. We work in communication, people, but we don't communicate. Yeah, it can be difficult. And I think working across time zones, working across cultures, and the funniest thing, all of the truisms that you hear of a market. The Germans are efficient.
Yes, all the stereotypes.
They all stand true, and it is absolutely true. And you have to just compensate for that and give different deadlines depending on the market you're working with, because it can sometimes tumble down upon you.
Well, look, we are in what I would probably call the knowledge business. And no one person in this business would ever have all the knowledge. So unless you have a bunch of people with complementary skills and knowledge working together, you will never ever get to prove your value to any of your clients. And that's why share, I think, is the essential part of the DNA. I would say probably that's how Mindshare was designed, but for anyone to be successful in the knowledge business, I think that's a prerequisite. So it is all about collaboration. It is about having a very diverse talent pool, a diverse set of people, expertise in different areas, being actually able to drop egos, come together, work together, and then come up with great things for clients to appreciate what Mindshare or any of the companies in this sector can do for them. So it is, to my mind, that it is probably the defining characteristic of this industry is the sharing. And these are the times when you really feel happy that you work with a global network, because you can just have easy access to so many experts from within the network, from around the world, who you can call upon for any kind of task.
But yeah, I agree with everything you've just said, absolutely, and it's kind of how our business ticks. And being global is absolutely core to delivering for our clients. But I think something else, and going back to maybe one of the things that drew me to this sector, is this idea of entrepreneurship. And I think share to me is always having a share in the business. I think there's something that's a very wonderful thing that I've discovered working at Mindshare that's perhaps different to Mindshare than other agencies, is that there is a real sense that you can do something different at Mindshare, and you can have a share in its journey in creating its next evolution.
Right.
And so rewarding people's entrepreneurial spirit and their endeavours to deliver and discover something different. I've always found Mindshare to be there and very supportive of that. So for me, share is about a share of the business.